Doug.
Hi, Gracie.
Thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks for having me. This was
We're
wonderful.
looking forward to the conversation.
Happy to be here. This is really nice. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate it.
I was hoping we could start when you were in our shoes. When you were just starting out on your career, your first job out of business school was as an analyst at American Airlines.
Correct.
You moved around between a couple different airline companies after that, but never left the industry. What drew you to that first job at American and to the airline industry?
Yeah, you're going to test my memory. It's a long time ago. But no, a lot of people in our industry, you will find just grew up, with jet fuel in their veins and sit and watch airplanes take off, when they were 12 years old at the airport. I didn't do any of that stuff. I was not a huge commercial aviation enthusiast or anything like it. I was looking for a job. I'd gone straight through from undergrad to graduate school. My concentration was in finance. I wanted to go somewhere where finance was important. Mm-hmm. So I looked toward heavily capitalized industries, and airlines popped up. So as did a number of others. So it wasn't so much the airlines, and I was fortunate enough that at the time American Airlines was trying to build a hub in Nashville, Tennessee, where I was getting my MBA. So they came to campus, I interviewed, and they invited me back to Dallas. I liked the people there. It really was as simple as that. It was, I knew I wanted to go somewhere where what I was reasonably proficient at mattered.
Yeah.
So that was as targeted as I did, though. But having done it, I loved it. It's a fantastic business. It's really dynamic. So that's kind of why I stayed in it, I think. But it wasn't anything more scientific than that.
That makes sense. But you did stay in the industry. And many of our generation are job hoppers. A lot of us, our next jobs, we won't be there for more than a couple of years. What's your advice as someone who stayed in the same industry for so long to people who are thinking about jumping between companies and industries over the course of their careers?
Again, all I know is what I did, so it's hard to suggest that that's the only way to do it, because it's not. But what happened with me again is I got into this business. I found I really enjoyed it. What I like about the airline business is that all the disciplines are really important. I said I wanted to go somewhere where finance mattered, but finance does matter. But so does it's a consumer product, so marketing is incredibly important. There's no more complex operation in the world, so logistics is incredibly important and valued. The maintenance function is really a manufacturing function. So every discipline is really important, and how you make all those things come together is really important. So what I liked about it is the ability to gravitate to different areas over time. But so much staying in the industry, I don't know. I know at times there were, I contemplated doing other things. It wasn't that I think, oh no, I need to stay in this business for any reason. Just the opportunities that came around or continue to be in the same business. Now I don't think I can do anything else. This is all I've done. So I don't know. So I will say that it's certainly nice when we bring in people from the outside, because you bring in a fresh perspective, and people in our business tend to hold on to some views of the past that maybe we don't want to hold on to anymore. So there's always some value in bringing people in from the outside, but there's also a tremendous amount of value of having people who have been in the business and know it and have seen the cycles and understand. So I think either way, we need some of each. But there certainly is. If we find someone who's just moving around, it's just in for a couple of years and out, it's not particularly helpful to us. Because it takes longer than that to really figure out what's going on.
When you first arrived at this company that has so many different disciplines that are important, you hadn't been watching the planes take off when you were a kid, right. And there's a lot of value from the industry expertise. Just starting out, how did you make a name for yourself in a company like that?
You show up and do your job, and try and make sure that you're being responsive to what to what the organization is looking for. I don't think I was, I wasn't this incredibly hard driving cutthroat. I'm going to make sure that I get this job before someone else does. But I certainly cared about what I did. I took it seriously, and I worked really hard. I took pride in the work that I did, and people noticed that. And so it wasn't so much that I was going to figure out how I got to this job by this time, but rather I showed up and did the job that I was asked to do. I think I did it pretty well, and people recognized that, and they want you to do more things. And of course, then, what really matters is as you start moving up in an organization, the skills that might have been really helpful as an analyst are not particularly the ones that are as important as a manager. So you got to figure out how to adapt and do those things. But anyway, I tried to do what I was asked to do, and I took it really seriously. I worked pretty hard. Because it mattered to me. So, but if you do that, people will find you.
Yeah. Were there any key people or key events that helped you, especially when you were moving up into new positions where maybe you didn't have the skills yet?
Yeah. Well, what I remember from back then, where my career really started to progress a little faster, is when I was promoted. I was a pretty good analyst, but there were definitely better analysts than me. Smarter, this is like good at Lotus 1, 2, 3, or whatever the hell we used back then. So anyway, they could build a spreadsheet faster, and so I was pretty good, but definitely not the best. Where my career started progressing is when I was promoted to, managing a small group of people, and I've always liked working in teams. Played team sports growing up. That's what I was comfortable in that environment, and I quickly realized that if I can just get these 5 people who are smarter than me to work together, we can do a lot more than the 6 of us can independently. And I did find that I think I did that role better than certainly my peers at the time. Our team was able to produce more. I tried to make sure they all got credit so that people wanted to be on my team. And as a result, that's when things started taking off for me a little more.
Interesting. A lot of these dynamics are the dynamics of a more traditional, complex company that's been around for a while and has its hierarchies. A lot of us are looking at jobs in Silicon Valley where we move fast and break things,
Right.
which isn't necessarily how I would describe American Airlines. So give us the other perspective. What can we learn at this point in our careers from an established company that we couldn't learn at a startup?
Well, that's a hard question for me to answer. Again, back when I came out, there wasn't an internet and there weren't people. The best and brightest didn't go work at startups. They went and worked at established firms. So it's what I knew. But look, the basic principles I'm certain are the same. That is, leadership skills, getting people to work as a unit, communicating with people in a way that they understand what the mission of the organization is, in a way that they feel motivated to produce. Though that's how you're successful in a large organization. I can't imagine not how you're successful in a smaller organization. And look, the large organization stuff, while it may sound old and stodgy, I think the reason our team has done as well as we have, given the cards we were handed anyway, is because I think we think much more like that startup mentality. We took risk others wouldn't take. We did things people thought were crazy. And there's so much value to be created if you're willing to do that in large organizations, because the organization doesn't, it will reward the behavior, but it doesn't encourage the behavior. Anyway, any of you, if asked, look, this is I'll give you roll a dice, and if it comes up 6, I'll give you $50. But if it doesn't come up 6, you got to pay me 5. We're all gonna say, well, of course, you're gonna be 10-to-1 odds on something that's 1 in 6. If you try and do that, if you mention that to your boss in a large organization, I got this idea, the boss will say, wait a second, you're telling me 5 out of 6 times it's not gonna work? Yeah. I'm gonna look bad 5 out of 6 times? We're not doing that. But those of us who are willing to say, what are you talking? I don't care. It's a great bet. We're going to do that. Yeah. Do extremely well. because the risk-reward relationship works, of course, like it does everywhere else, and you're in an environment where risk is less encouraged. So the reward is much higher than it would be if everyone was actually taking the same level of risk or had the same attitude. So, look, again, I only know what I've been through, but I don't feel like it's been boring and stodgy. It's been incredibly dynamic and exciting, and the fun part is taking these risks and seeing and when others don't, and having some things that others would look at and think, oh God, that didn't work for you, which we say, well, it's exactly what we thought it was. I mean, I would do the exact same thing again because it was the right decision. Just because it came up two doesn't mean it was the wrong decision to take that bet. It was the right decision. So, and as long as you keep doing those things, particularly in an organization where you're not competing with a lot of people who are doing the same thing, you can do really well.
And is this perspective you've developed about being willing to take the risk, has this developed and changed over your career?
Oh, I don't think so.
Really?
I don't know. I used to like going to Vegas a lot when I was younger. Look, I'm a big proponent of risk taking and always have been. So, and like I say, it's helped me a lot. And things like just in the introduction of my career, when I left, this is inside airline stuff, so sorry, but back when I left American Airlines in whatever that was, 1991. American Airlines, that was the place to be if you're, that we hired 40 MBAs a year. We were the best and the brightest, and no one went to work for Northwest Airlines, for God's sakes, from American, but I did, because I could do a lot more at Northwest than I could at American. So I've been, anyway, that's I would encourage people, to go take risks, and that's what I've been doing for a long time.
Good, since the Vegas days.
Exactly.
But combined with your risk-taking style, there's also a lot out there who say you have a leadership style that's very humble, very confident, but very humble. And the airline industry has a lot of folks with some pretty big egos.
We got confidence.
Yes. Everyone's got the confidence, but the humility, I think, is a distinctive feature. What are the trade-offs between the two different styles when you're running such a complex organization, so many different people to communicate with, as you expressed before?
Okay, well, thanks for the characterization. I appreciate that. I hope it's true. What I know is that this is a huge team sport, and there's no individual that makes a difference. And the way it makes a difference is if you get the whole team pulling together and working together. So. I'm stunned sometimes to see how some individuals try and position themselves because I can't imagine what it's like to work for that person when you're the one doing all the work and they're taking all the credit.
Yeah.
So I try not to do that. It's hard, by the way, because people want to do that. The media only wants to talk to me, and everyone wants to try and simplify it into you made this decision, and I didn't make those decisions. Somebody else made those decisions. I said okay. At any rate, it's not. I don't think it's a conscious attempt to try and be different than anybody. It's just who we are. And what we've learned long ago is, if we all work as a team and stick together as a team, we can do really good things. But if any one of us tries to make it about us, then it starts to fall apart. So that's worked for us. Other ways work for other people. That's just what works for us.
Yeah. Building on that, the airline industry is one that invokes a lot of negative sentiment among customers sometimes. The Wall Street Journal, I've heard it mentioned.
Yeah,
the Wall Street Journal recently published a report showing that American Airlines was ranked last in sort of overall ranking of U.S. airlines for 2015.
I didn't read that one.
I'll send it to you.
I'm sure it's wrong.
Probably, just a slip up. Maybe I was looking at it upside down, but.
That happens.
Well, what I want to know is in a team sport, and you're the team captain, and there's results like this, how do you lead the team?
Well, you understand the results and make sure. Look, I did read the article, and you didn't read it upside down. But look, we're in the middle of an integration during the
Yeah.
time that was measured. So things like what they measured are important. But some of the things they measure are really hard to do when you're running two separate airlines, like baggage connections.
Yeah.
When we've got people connecting from U.S. Airways to American Airlines, and it's harder. So all that we're well aware of that. That's the problem of integration, and that stuff's fixed. So we won't be last next year. American Airlines is one airline now, and we'll get the. So anyway, first and foremost, that's the answer. But to that specific set of circumstances. But I'm not about to suggest, we do everything great. It's a great business, and people shouldn't complain. It's a difficult function to transport people, through bad weather like we're about to have in the East Coast. And people pay a lot for the product. And look, if we do everything perfectly, if we do our jobs perfectly well, the aircraft's perfectly maintained, everyone shows up on time, everyone does their job exactly as they should. The best we're going to do in terms of on-time performance over the course of a year anyway is probably around 85%. 85% of the time, we can guarantee you should expect in the very, very best run airline that you're going to arrive within and by the way, the definition of on time is within 14 minutes of your scheduled arrival time, which is nice too. That's our government. But nonetheless, so what other business has 15% failure rates and for a product, but that's entirely due to weather. That's in the example I just gave, there's no maintenance cancellations. 15% of our flights get delayed because of weather. So we have this challenge of a product that is a means to an end. Most people don't buy airline tickets to fly around on an airplane. They're trying to get somewhere else, and is also because of how complicated it is and how capital intensive it is, it's reasonably expensive. So they expect it to work as a means to an end, and when it doesn't, they get upset. Our challenge is to make sure that we manage that as well, and we're getting much better at this. When things do go wrong, make sure that we're able to respond much more quickly and get people where they need to go, and because people do understand weather, but they still want to get where they're trying to go. So anyway, I've already forgot what the question was, Gracie. But we work really hard at doing in a difficult job to do it really well and to focus on customers. We have a phenomenal team of people. We got over 100,000 employees who are just out there doing a great job every day. It's a really noble thing they do. They get beat up sometimes because they're the ones standing there when the plane can't go. But the reality is, those people are. They make commerce run. Business couldn't operate without the airline industry. They get people to go see other people. They get people to go see the world, and it all happens because of the work they do, and we're really proud of it. But we know we have to get better at reaccommodating people when things go wrong.
Yeah, and related to things beyond your control, 10 days after you became CEO of U.S. Airways, you woke up to the news that 2 planes had crashed into the World Trade Center. Right. What went through your head at that moment, and what did you do that morning? I was in Phoenix at the time, working for America West Airlines, I was a CEO for 10 days. It was a nice 10 days, and then all relative.
So look, the immediate concern, of course, was for the safety of our team. So quickly after learning about the flights in the World Trade Center, my phone rang, and it was, the FAA was grounding the entire commercial airline fleet. And so we were putting airplanes down. So the best message I got was, hearing that every one of our airplanes was safe and they were on the ground. So, but anyway, then it quickly turns into, the next 3 days of trying, shutting down the airspace and those things. But not much longer once you get past the immediate safety concerns. And by the way, extreme empathy for those who didn't have their employees safe at American United. But shortly thereafter, we moved into what are we going to do about the long-term viability of this business and particularly the company that I was running, which is America West Airlines. We had arranged a financing with some suppliers of ours, Airbus and GE, to help get us through what was already a tough time. It was arranged, but we not fully executed. So that, of course, fell through. We found ourselves in a position where we absolutely, in that environment, did not have enough cash to make it through the winter. We were going to go, and in that environment, since there was no way, even through a bankruptcy filing, to expect things that would, like DIP loans that would allow you to survive, we were going to shut the company down. We were going to liquidate without some sort of capital infusion. So, and the only possible way to get a capital infusion in that environment was the U.S. government. They established this government loan guarantee program. So I went from, when I took the job in September of 2001, the one thing I remember telling the board is, look, I know I can do all this stuff. You know, I've done operations, I've done the marketing side, I've done the finance side. The only thing I really haven't done is government affairs, but that's okay, because we're this little airline in Phoenix and we never have to do anything with Washington, really. It's more the bigger airlines mess with that. Well, I found myself living in Washington, D.C., you know, lobbying for a government loan for the next 3 months.
Crash course.
Yeah.
And how did you communicate? So you had a lot of communications with the government the months that followed. How did you think about the various communications to the public, to customers, employees, shareholders?
Yeah, well, we tried to make them think everything was okay. And even though we weren't quite sure it was, we were honest. But let everybody know that we were going to get this done, even though we weren't certain we were. So the communication was anyway. It was communication was important, but the real important part was trying to get through this, get through the loan process. By the way, I'm going to embarrass somebody. Is Marlena Slowick in here? Hi. Her father, John Slowick, was our investment banker through all this. So he lived through this with me. So anyway, nice to see you. Thanks. Tell your dad hi. So anyway, he and I went through a lot together. But
yeah.
So look, you didn't ask. I want to give you one quick story, which I think can help pull this together, and also this career stuff. Because seeing Marlena reminded me of this. Look, we went through this process, and and we were told by the government no. We were told this. You know, Marlena's father and I sat there and had the Department of Treasury send us a fax, at City's Government Affairs Office Friday at 5 p.m. so they could then leave. Yeah. That said, we've reviewed your file and need to tell you that we cannot approve your application at this time, which is, it's no. So, and it's the worst day of my life. We were going to liquidate. And I didn't know what we were going to do about it. And again, from this time now, so it's now, I'm the CEO of this airline. I've been CEO, this is now October, November. So I've been CEO for 2 months. Yeah, exactly. So I'm thinking, I just can't help but think, this didn't turn out right. My career, I'm going to be the worst CEO of all time. I was CEO for 2 months, and we liquidated the company. What am I going to do? And all this kind of me stuff. So, which again I don't feel badly about that. That's natural. Get into jobs and you kind of worry about your career, and I was still worried about my career and what I was going to do. And here I knew I was going to be at this company that was going to liquidate. So, and here's the career story. So I go and on that flight home from DC to Phoenix, DC to Phoenix. I always get up and talk to our team and crew because it's important, and I learn from them. But I didn't want to go talk to the flight attendant crew on this flight because I knew everyone. This was front page news. No one knew yet about this letter, but everyone was asking. So I knew they were going to ask, and I knew I couldn't lie to the flight attendants. But I also didn't. So I was contemplating just spending this 4 hours in my seat. But then I said, I can't do that. I got to get up. So I go back and talk, and I'm glad I did. This flight attendant in the back asked me what's going on. I tell her, well, gee, it doesn't look too good right now. We're fighting through it, but I don't feel good about it. And she says, well, what's that going to mean? I said, well, look, if we can't get this done, we'll file bankruptcy and we'll try and hang on, but I don't feel good about that either. And she just looks at me and says, you can't do that. I've been doing this job for 10 years. I'm a single mom. I've got my life arranged around this flight attendant job. I can't do anything else. I'm really good at it, which, by the way, she was because I'd seen her. And you just can't let that happen. And I'm like, yeah. So, okay. But no, it was really helpful. So I went back, sat in my seat, pulled out the damn letter again, and realized that it said at this time. can't approve it this time. So, okay, I landed that night. We went straight to work. We worked all weekend. We showed back up in DC Monday morning, John with us, with a new application. And these guys at the Treasury said, what are you doing here? I said, you said not at this time. Here's another application. We're not going away. And we kept fighting, and we didn't give up. And so anyway, from that time, that airline, that little American West airline, had to have that loan. That little airline, American West Airlines, lived off of wage advantages. Other airlines went through bankruptcy and got their wages down to ours. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden we had a new problem, which was we didn't have the revenue generating capability they did, but they had the same cost structure as us now. That airline wasn't going to work, so we had to do a merger. So we merged with US Airways. And then the US Airways ended up essentially the same kind of problem, so we did a merger with American. All those things, none of those was, from the time of that encounter, was I spending time thinking what's best for my career. Mm-hmm. Every one of them was, I'm responsible for these hardworking people who, if we don't do our jobs right, aren't going to have a job. And it's not their fault. These people are fantastic. They're depending upon us to make sure that we put the company into a position where they don't have to worry about whether or not the company's going to be there for them. So the reason we worked so hard for those mergers, and the reason I personally worked so hard on it, was not because we wanted to get ourselves in a position of being CEO of the largest airline in the world, is because that was the only way to get that group of people in a safe harbor. Anyway, so the moral of this story is, from the time I stopped thinking about my career, and started thinking about doing my job for a bigger cause, my career took off. And so anyway, I like that part. So my message of this is, it's hard to do. You always hear people say, oh, go do what you love. To which I thought, that's BS. I love playing basketball, but nobody's going to pay me to do that. So, but I think but what really is true, if you can figure out a way to make what you do be bigger than just you, that'll work out really well for you. And again, it's not that easy. It's a lot like saying do what you love. But if you can find a way, once you find that, don't let go of it, because that's when things really start happening. When you're not just, because look, if it had been me, if I'd have been worried about, oh gee, I want to be CEO of American Airlines, some point during this whole fight, I would have said, oh, CEO of US Airways isn't that bad. Yeah. I'm fine. I'm going to be fine. I don't have to move. This is okay. But that never crossed our minds, because this was, no, we got to get this done for all these people that are counting on us. Mm-hmm. So.
And I'm glad you bring up the mergers, because I wanted to ask, before we talk about the success of the US Airways American merger, about what you learned from the failed attempts to merge with United and Continental.
Yeah, they weren't failures.
Oh, good. I'm already learning.
You're reading it upside down again. And look, this is back to the risk thing, and of course this is perceived as failures, but it's exactly what I'm really glad we did it. We were the first one that Gracie's referring to was shortly after doing the American West US Airways merger, and we were kind of we were actually shorter than this point. We were just 1 year into it. Delta Airlines was in bankruptcy. They were about to emerge from bankruptcy. We came up with the great idea of bringing them out of bankruptcy with a merger with the then US Airways, which hadn't really even merged with America West very well yet. But it was a good idea. It would have been a really good airline. And the Delta team didn't like it, so it turned into a hostile, which doesn't happen very often, hostiles of companies in bankruptcy. But we tried it. We knew going in it was high risk and probably more likely than not to work, but it was rolling the six on the die. Huge upside if it worked, excuse me. And if it didn't work, it didn't work. So, and also if it didn't work, what we knew is we were going to, they would have to figure out something else to do. Okay. And they did. What happened is, so long story short, that group of people, when you're in bankruptcy, you don't have a board, you have creditors. Well, you have a board, but the people who run the company are the people that you stiffed. So the people that they owe money that aren't getting paid are now in control of the company. And those people, who we were appealing to by saying, look, you'll get much more of your money back if you do this with us than with them, kind of believed us, but at the end said, look, we're gonna stick with them. But they insisted that board be changed, that board put people on that were pro-consolidation, including Richard Anderson, who now runs the place. And shortly after the merger, that Northwest went and Delta went and did a merger with Northwest. I don't think that would have happened if we hadn't done the hostel. And if Delta hadn't merged with Northwest, United wouldn't have. Then our next one, then our next aborted attempt that we failed at was trying to then, after that happened, merge U.S. Airways and United, and we got pretty close there. But United eventually told us no and picked Continental instead. So United merged with Continental. Another thing that wouldn't have happened had we not tried to get the first one done. So anyway, I was being flippant with you saying we didn't fail. From the outside, those are failures.
Yeah.
And that's what they expect my point. I don't feel badly about them at all. And people would write at the time, oh, gee, again, pointing it all on me, Doug failed at this merger attempt. But it didn't do exactly what we wanted. We wanted them both to work.
Right.
But it progressed us to where we could do what we needed to do, and it moved the industry where it needed to move. And there was no one else out there, trying to make that happen. I don't know where we'd be if we hadn't tried to do those things.
And so with American, I think one of the reasons it was so successful was you built this strong relationship with the labor unions. Can you talk about the traits and what about you as a leader made those relationships so successful?
Well, again, not all me. A really good team of people who, who cared about so much about taking care of our team that we knew that we could do so much for them that we also knew it was going to be best for the employees of American. So we did the rather non-traditional step of, while American was in bankruptcy, beginning negotiating. So Americans in bankruptcy, we're at U.S. Airways. We started negotiating with the American Airlines unions for a contract that we would be willing to sign if indeed a merger got done. These people didn't work for us. They work for American. And we're meeting with them in Phoenix and signing contracts with them, which, look, I didn't do lightly. I know it offended my friends in American that we were meeting with their employees. But it was, again, we had to get this done for our team. It was the right thing to do. So to your point, we recognized, and we learned it in the Delta transaction, frankly. We did have the creditors on board in the Delta transaction. What we didn't get was the employees on board. They were very proud of Delta. They wanted to stay with Delta, and that hurt us. So we recognized we needed to get the team on board. So we approached American's employees. We laid out for them what we planned to do. We told them why we thought it was better. They agreed, and it wouldn't have gotten done without them. So it worked out well.
And now that the merger is successful, you're the CEO of the largest airline in the world, 120,000 employees around the globe. You're also the father of 3.
Yes.
How does being a CEO compare to being a father?
Father's a lot harder. I don't know. Like, I have great kids. I try really hard to be a father more than a CEO. My job, I probably spend more hours as CEO, unfortunately. But frankly, I learned so much from being a father that I can use at work. Anyway, it's raising children is this amazing thing that's everybody does it at some point. So it's not like I'm an expert here, but you just watching the development and watching how people interact and watching how your kids interact helps me a lot to understand and to actually go manage the company. So I've learned a lot more about. I've become a better CEO because I'm a father. I try really hard to be a good father as well. I do things to make sure that I'm home as much as I can be. This is a rarity for me where where I'm out of town for a night and it's not required work, but I wanted to do it. I wanted to do it for George, and I appreciate it as well. But so I try and stay home as much as I can. My job requires me to travel. I refuse. I almost never do work dinners in Dallas. If I'm gonna be home, I'm gonna have a meal with my kids. If somebody wants to meet with me, of course, that's important to the company. We can do it at lunch or breakfast, or we can do it in my office. But there's no reason for me to be going to a dinner in Dallas. So I have rules like that I just make sure that I stay engaged, stay balanced.
When you moved to Dallas after the acquisition, was that a family conversation about how you balance where the kids have been raised versus where you're doing work?
Oh, yes. You're good at this. Do you want to hear this story?
I do.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, no, it was horrible. I said the worst day of my life was that day that I got the letter. This might have been the worst day of my life. This is a really hard day. You know, my kids, my eldest, who's 20, was born in Minneapolis when I was at Northwest, but we moved when he was 3 weeks old. And the other two were born in Phoenix. And that's where they were raised. And so they didn't, you know, and this merger was in the papers all the time. And, you know, I had one day my daughter, who at the time I guess she's 15 now, so she was 13, sends me a text and says, you know, Mrs. Roswell told me the merger is going through. It's like,
Thanks, Mrs. Roswell.
Mrs. Roswell's a friend of a friend. I just like, well, I will know before Mrs. Roswell. And I promise I'll tell you. But, you know, because the things would happen, like, you know, a rumor would, you know, that, you know, we got to deal done with the unions. And that's, okay, the merger's gone through is the way it gets reported. So all of a sudden my kids are just going crazy. So anyway, they didn't want to move. So anyway, the bad part was when we finally did to do it, and I'd been telling them all along, quit listening to everybody else. When I tell you, it's when it's happening. Don't worry about it until then. So they at least had some comfort in that. And then one day I had to come home and grab them and say, hey, I need to talk to you. And as soon as my daughter walked in, I said, hey, I need to talk to you, and pulled her, and we'd already had the two boys and my wife there, and she walked in the room and just saw that they were there and just started sobbing. So aren't you glad you made me tell that story?
I'm sorry.
That's all right. So no, it was really, but look, that's stuff you got to do. She's fantastic. She's fine now. She wouldn't leave Dallas, so it's all fine. But yeah, I mean, that was the bad part of doing this. We were, and again, gets back to, look, if we were just doing this for ourselves, we just stayed where we were perfectly fine and happy.
Yeah.
But you got to do what's right for the organization.
And now that you're at this point, the merger, the final pieces have come together. Hopefully friends have been made in Dallas. What's next for American as a company, and what's next for you as CEO?
Well, look, we have set an objective of ourselves of becoming the greatest airline in the world, and we're not there yet. So we have a lot of work to do. We spent the last 2 years integrating, which is sounds boring, and it is, but it's really hard work, and it takes a lot of time and effort, and our team has just knocked the ball out of the park. But now we've gotten through the vast majority of that. We still have some left. And now we really need to go start producing now that we are working as one airline. And we know what we need to do. Our objective is to be the best in the world, and you know that's a somewhat nebulous term, but we know we're not it now, so that at least we know we have to make some progress. But what it certainly means is you got to be an airline that people want to fly. You have to be an airline where people want to work, and you have to be an airline where investors want to put their money. And you know, we're doing okay on each of those, but we can do a lot better on each, and we're not the best at any of them. And we want to be the best at all of them. So we're going to make huge improvements to the product. It's already begun. That includes the operational reliability issues that you mentioned, but it also includes you know, entire modernization of the fleet, brand new airplanes. We now have the youngest fleet in the world, or in the United States. We have that includes you know, Wi-Fi through all of our airplanes, including international, lie-flat seats international, taking our Admirals clubs to look like, you know, the kind of clubs you'd see when you fly internationally, not just when you fly in the United States. So making it a true global airline with a real global product. So we have a lot of work to do, and we have a lot of work to do with our team. There's a lot of history at American Airlines of management, labor relations that are just horrible. I'm not trying to say anything bad about prior management. They had really difficult situation to go through, but the result was a really, really bad history that's hard for people to let go of. And so we're trying to convince people that that's over and this is new, and we try and figure out ways to do that every day, just surprise people with something to say, wow, that's different. This feels different. So we got a lot of work to do with our team too. And by the way, it's incredibly important to the first one. The airline business is so much about the employees that you interact with and their attitudes. So if we can get our employees to be excited about being where they are, our customers will be much happier on the airplane, and that'll help us drive more passengers to the airline, and that'll help us meet our goals of getting a return for our investors. So it starts with the employees.
A lot of exciting work ahead.
Thanks.
Excellent. I'd like to open up to the audience now for questions. I think our first one is from Twitter.
So thanks both for a wonderful conversation. So the first question from Twitter comes from a chap called Jake. who says that the Economist wrote that airlines are wonderful generators of profit for everyone except themselves. How do you envisage changing that, especially with headwinds such as climate change and so forth?
Yeah, that's that was true from the beginning of time until recently. This airline, this business is transformed, and I believe that as much as I can believe, as much as I can possibly stress. Not no one. Very few others seem to believe it. The market doesn't believe it, as you can see with the way our stock is trading versus what we're looking at in terms of earnings. It's hard for our employees to believe it. It's hard for the management team to believe it, and it's obviously hard for the economists to believe it. So, but look, this is a real business now. We're producing real returns, and we've got a business now that it's still a cyclical business. People will fly less in bad times and fly more in good times, but we're producing profits now that are in line with general industry, actually a little ahead of them, peaks double. The highest earnings the industry's ever produced, even though we're hopefully not at peak margins right now. So I think the industry has been largely transformed, largely due to the consolidation that we discussed. So that's what we needed to do. The problem with the world before, where everyone else made money and we didn't, all of our suppliers made money, Boeing made money. That's, by the way, how America West and others stayed around, because those who lived off of our carcass needed us to be around for a little more, so they'd loan us money to keep us kicking around. I've on 3 occasions received loans from either GE or Airbus to save a company from going into bankruptcy, America West and US Airways. But no one talks about that anymore. We're not even kind of doing that. We're out raising, we raised last week $1 billion of aircraft financing at below 4%. So this is, anyway, the answer to that question, if you'd asked me 5 years ago or 10 years ago, was we've got to get consolidation done because the industry is too fragmented and we can't provide to consumers what they want, which is the ability to, have one airline take them everywhere they want to go. And as a result, we all end up trying to do that, and we are incredibly inefficient. So anyway, I think we're past it. A lot of questions.
There's mics going around. Thank you.
Morning, thanks for coming.
Sure.
Really appreciated your remarks on teamwork. It made me think right away of one of your agents in Raleigh. Her name is Tammy Fields. We fly a ton, and she has basically adopted our family. She keeps an eye on award seat searches that we're trying to do to Tokyo or somewhere, and calls me up when something comes through. Just so far above and beyond the call of duty. We were stranded one time in Peru. It was Tammy that got us out of the fix and got us flights and pulled whatever strings needed to be pulled. Really the kind of success story you're looking for. I'd like to give you her name when you're finished, if that's okay.
I got it, and I see my colleague down there typing it into his iPhone. So we got it.
Tammy Fields in Raleigh.
We will definitely let her know.
Tammy Fields in Raleigh.
Thank you for telling me. We have a phenomenal group of people like that. So thanks for telling me.
Hi. I wanted to ask about how you keep loyal customers given the recent award program devaluations among your competitors, United and Delta, and American's impending award devaluation on March 22nd. How do you look at customer loyalty and maintain their trust in their business?
Yeah, thanks. We don't view it as devaluation. We view it as a change. And look, it is. I mean, these programs, when they were established, for whatever reason, they were established as, we measured loyalty by how many miles you fly. And that's one way to do it. But we don't report our P&L as miles flown minus expenses. It's revenues minus expenses. And, what's more important and what we want to reward, for most people, miles flown and revenues are a reasonable approximation. But with that model, you had these very, very odd things we created. People find the lowest possible fare they could find, and spending their weekends flying around on the lowest fares they could find so that they could get free travel somewhere else. look, we love those people. I'm not trying. Those are customers of ours. But when that happens, what we as an airline are choosing to do is give that individual the first class seat to Paris instead of the individual who didn't fly as many miles and actually spend his time at his weekends at home, but during the week paid full fare. And that's not the right model. So it's a shift in the model. It's one of these things, again, where it's a transformation. So everyone that grew up in that old model says that you're making this worse for me. But we're not making it worse for everyone. It's worse for some, it's better for others. And I think it's more fair and more equitable, and it's rewarding what we want to reward, which is those people who fly us, who pay the most, and who purchase the fares that are not just going around and trying to find $100 fares, transcons on a weekend to figure out how to get more miles. So again, it's great they do that. We encouraged that by the model we had. We'd like to actually have those seats for the people that are producing the most revenue for us.
Hello, Tobias from Germany. I would like to talk about technology because I haven't heard this at all today. I mean, I remember like 15 years ago, I was reading somewhere internet in the planes. I got very excited. I was very addictive to internet back then, and then it took 15 years until, at least in Europe, it was in most of the airplanes available. And even now, I mean, EasyJet, Ryanair, I mean, Lufthansa just started. It took like 15 years until people were able to use internet. In the US, it was a bit earlier, but it was still taking a long time. So my question is like how in the future you can guarantee the technology is being integrated much earlier into airplanes, especially in regards of customer experience, because I mean I would love to have already an American Airlines app where I could upgrade myself during a plane, maybe for a special price on business class, where I maybe could skip the line if it's or maybe get fast boarding because there's now a huge queue and I feel like I'm just tired. I mean I really feel like the customer experience, which a lot of online companies are offering and the mobile technologies out there, has arrived at the airlines.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, look, we're moving as fast as we possibly can, and because of customer demand, because of people like you who are insisting. The reality is Wi-Fi on aircraft, that you talked about. I remember us sitting around and debating it, and there's no way it can possibly pay for itself. We got to carry this stuff around. These are antennas that communicate down to cell towers, and they're really expensive, and they're heavy, and people got there's no way we're going to have people pay for it. But once it was on the airplane on a few, customers started saying this airplane doesn't have Wi-Fi anymore, so there was no choice because we needed to have it, and then it came really really quickly. So I don't know if that was so much technology as maybe resistance from airlines to go do something that we couldn't cost justify. But that's all behind us now. I mean, this is going so fast, and we're all trying to figure out how to leapfrog somebody else. As it relates to some of the things you're talking about, we're working diligently to figure out everything we can to make sure the customer experience can be done as much through technology as possible. Some of the things you described we simply can't do because of the regulations we have to live with. I can tell you right now, if the way I travel and the way probably most of you travel, there's no reason for me to see an individual until I get on the airplane. There's no reason to have an interaction with, or even to see an American Airlines employee until I get, because I'm not checking a bag, and I've got my boarding pass on my iPhone, and I hand it to someone who then puts it under the thing, and I can do that. But we're not allowed to not have an agent stand there and just let an individual decide that they're going to get on the airplane. So some of this is just requirements that we're always going to have. But we can do a lot better, and we're working really hard at it. I can tell you, American Airlines, as it relates to this, we now have, we're putting internet onto our international flights. It's not on all of them yet, but we're way ahead of the game there. So transatlantic things you couldn't do before, because now we're shooting up satellites instead of going down to cell towers. And with that technology, that's new technology. Now we can actually provide Wi-Fi service anywhere in the air. So we're moving to that as quickly as we can. So we'll keep working on it, but we agree with you.
I'm afraid I'm going to take the last question for myself, which is...
You earned it.
Thank you. I've tried.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for the MBAs in the room? If you could go back and it's your time at Owen, what do you wish you could tell yourself?
Well, anyway, again, so many of you are going to go off and live in your basements, so I'm not sure what to tell you about about how to do that. You're smarter than I am, but what I can tell you is what I do know, at least from a more traditional perspective, where you go show up at a job, is I was honored. As part of the introduction, to have this the relationships matter piece mentioned. That's what I think. What I believe is, and what I would encourage. The reason was I was talking to a group like this, and what I told them is, look, what I have learned in my career, that I know it's taught in business schools and it seems so matter of fact that why do you even teach it? But you can't stress it enough. Is how important relationships are, and how you treat people in your relative success. And there's this perception amongst some amongst some outside of business that business is this the way you get ahead is backstabbing, cutthroat. That doesn't work at all. It absolutely. I mean, it will work for a short period of time, but you'll be done, and you'll go need to find another job before too long. In another industry, because it doesn't work. What matters is people that in every relationship they have, you treat people with respect and dignity, and you show up and do your job well. And what I watch people, I don't think they fully appreciate is from the time you walk in the door, that starts, and you're building relationships with people, and you don't have any idea. You can't possibly decide, oh, that's somebody I really need to have a relationship, and that person's not. That's what I've learned through all this crazy story of all the stuff I've been through. I mean, this American Airlines, US Airways merger, we ended up with people in part of this process that helped us out, that said, oh yeah, 15 years ago, we worked on this project, and at that time, there's no way we would have thought that individual was going to be representing, the flight attendants who were really important to us at the time. But thank goodness we treated that person well 15 years ago. And if we hadn't, and they hadn't been treated maybe so well from the other side, it made a huge difference. So anyway, the message is this: from the day you walk in the door, you're gonna start those relationships, and people are, and if you try and say, oh, I care about that person, not that person, that's not gonna work. So treat everybody the same. Treat everybody, and if you do that, you will just the people that do that versus those who don't do dramatically better. And I think that's the biggest key as anything. So give somebody the same intellect, energy, integrity, all that, but not the ability to build relationships with somebody who can, and they're going to have dramatically different careers. So that would be my advice. Just be nice to people.
That's great advice.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Doug.
All right.
It's been amazing.
Great job.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.